Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics, the pre-election edition predictions. We're going to talk about every race on the ballot. Ryan Hawkins, Democratic Strategist, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Friend of the show, Jane Dueker, welcome back. I love the yellow.
Thank you.
Very festively fall.
That's right.
Casey Wheat with HRCC, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And David Steelman, welcome back, sir. You come back, and I think it's great. Like, anybody can, run a perfect record and retire. It takes a true competitor to come back after they have a perfect record.
That's why, because you tricked me. I thought this was being taped for after the election. So.
No. So 2 years ago, you came and Jane came, made some predictions about some elections. As it turns out, you were spot on every time. Jane, not so much. You had a little bit of a kicker with Donald Trump, though. You had a little help from the president.
No kidding. Well, the other thing about the last election in 2016, I thought I knew who was voting, and I thought I knew who they were voting for. But, we could call southern Missouri counties. It was way up, the turnout. The one thing you learn if you're going to not be an amateur and be a professional at this, which I'm not, you follow the data. It is us amateurs who go with our gut. But I got to tell you, the data all says a big Holly win, and I think it's going to be a squeaker. I don't believe the data. I don't think that the modern turnout model and the way they poll that really captures who's turning out in this election.
Jane Dueker, I think since the Kavanaugh hearings, Josh Hawley's campaign has had momentum, and I would say the trend lines, if you're in one of the two camps right now, you have to feel pretty good at being in the Hawley camp. But I think Claire McCaskill has one thing that doesn't come out in a poll, and that's a ground game, right?
Oh, she has an incredible ground game that I've never seen. So I will give her that. And I think Joe Biden was a huge shot in the arm. And I think that things are really tight. I mean, Fox News didn't get the memo on Hawley, and they came out with a poll that said they were tied. Right. So with in a state that Trump won by 20 points, that right there says a lot. And I have to agree with David in that I'm not sure that the polls are accurately determining what turnout's going to be, because that's going to be everything. And so, I think it's going to be a nail biter, and I think St. Louis County could be a late night. And I think, if this is the race they're, deciding the Senate on, it's going to be a long night.
And Ryan Hawkins, Joe Biden comes in. I mean, if you don't like Joe Biden, you don't respect Joe Biden, it's probably you. Right. But the list of national Democrats that could come to Missouri and not have tomatoes thrown at them is like one.
Right.
He
and
would
it's
be
Joe Biden.
He'd be the unicorn.
It's Uncle Joe, right? I mean, listen, he came in, fired up the crowd. I agree with David on following the data. When Fox comes out and says it's 43-43 in a state where Trump goes, ballistic, I look at this and say, the opposite. I look at the momentum shifting in the last few days towards Claire, towards the ground game. I think Hawley wanted this election over about a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that he has run out of persuasion. I think that we are now into a point where the ground game is going to cost 2, maybe 3 points, and I think Claire's got a fantastic one.
I think if you look at the polling, I think you have to feel good about where Hawley's at. But I do think Claire McCaskill probably has a better group of people that have been hitting the streets all weekend and will be for the next 2 days. You run these campaigns all over the state. How important is a ground game? What can it really do?
Well, I think a ground game is very important. And while Claire does have a good campaign and a good ground game, the RNC has hit over 1 million doors in the state of Missouri for Josh Hawley. So we can't forget that when we're talking about ground game and how effective and how important it is.
I think maybe the most important thing is when Donald Trump comes to rule Missouri, I mean, it's like Caesar coming into Rome. I mean, the rural Missouri loves the guy. He's the only New York billionaire I've ever seen people love, but they love him.
Couldn't fit any more people into that. If I could be just a little bit of a naysayer, I think what has happened that kind of diffuses the ground game, I think that both the Democrats and Trump decided to nationalize this campaign in the Senate. I don't think that was the right decision by the Democrats. I think that's what's going to cost Claire the race at the end. I think the vote will go according to the Trump approval rating, and I think he's over 50% in Missouri, and I think that's what Hawley will get.
David, I'll throw you a different one, though. Do they have a choice? The national media is obsessed with Trump. Trump permeates people that don't even talk about politics.
The Democrats bit on the cheese. They got trapped into nationalizing this. When you have a candidate like Claire McCaskill, who has spent her entire career kind of forging an independent path, being fairly moderate, then all of a sudden she's forced by what I think are the extremes of your party, the Democrat Party, to where she can no longer represent working men and women, middle class, lower middle class, because they've nationalized it into marginalized arguments, oppression arguments. I think that's what's going to cost Claire this race.
The only thing I would differ on that is that Claire was smart enough to take pre-existing conditions.
Right.
She was the one that grabbed that, and then the national grabbed her issue because she found the issue that resonates with every Missouri voter. That's something the that directly affects every single Missourian. Exactly. And I think they glommed on to Claire as opposed to the other way around because she picked out the best issue for the voters.
Gene Dueker, after Joe Manchin said he was going to vote for Kavanaugh, do you think she made a political mistake not voting for Kavanaugh?
No, I don't think it matters.
It wouldn't have changed the race?
No.
Would not change the race?
No, and she made a conscious choice to vote, against him, and I think that look, she was going to pay the people that were so for Kavanaugh, whether they be in rural Missouri, whether they be in suburban St. Louis, they were never going to vote for her, regardless of how she voted for Kavanaugh. Right? That decision was already made. I think that it comes down to Claire talking about health care and about access to health care and about the fact that you have a pre-existing condition. We're going to make sure that the insurance companies, because that's who we're really fighting here. It's not, health care. It's not Obamacare. It's actually insurance company reform, and we're going to make sure that these insurance companies cover you regardless of your pre-existing condition. And Holly's got no answer for that. Except I'm going to sue him.
If you were super into the Kavanaugh thing, yeah, sure. But I think there's some people that weren't super into it that she would have looked more of a moderate if she had voted with him.
I think there's a handful of people throughout the state that, yeah, if she would have voted for Kavanaugh, she could have maybe won their votes. I don't think it's enough to make or break the election for her, though.
It's hard to say you're moderate when you vote for a very liberal president, very liberal judges, and you can't vote for a conservative president, conservative judges. You're a liberal, right?
Well, that's her problem. I know Claire McCaskill. I've known her since law school. She's not a liberal, but you're not going to convince the people of Missouri because she is forced by the party. Her mistake was not the Kavanaugh vote. Her mistake was the Gorsuch vote. Under the old rules, you voted for a president's Supreme Court nominee if they were qualified.
Yes.
All of us know that both Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were qualified. May not be great appointments, depends on your philosophy, they were qualified. And when a senator like Claire McCaskill can no longer vote for those qualified candidates, then that's why I say the race is nationalized.
It's my opinion, Missouri has two very good choices. Claire McCaskill may be a Democrat, she's a good senator. I actually think if this is her last term, she'll be more conservative than she has been in the past. I think that may be who she is, more moderate.
Well, again, I'm the Republican representative, but I know and I like Claire. But
well, give me a prediction then. How's this race go?
Holly by 2.
2?
I say Holly by 5.
Who wins?
I say McCaskill tight.
Tight?
Very tight. Like
one-ish?
Could be recount territory.
What happens?
I'm Claire +1. It's that close.
Yeah.
So I'm following the hottest Twitter account on Twitter right now, which is Greg Keller's. Greg is actually editing the Post and the Star's hit pieces on the Republican nominee post factos. I mean, I'm kind of with Kelly. I think it's going to be a 7-point Holly win. I think it's going to be a good night for Republicans, and I think it all goes back to that Kavanaugh hearing. Unfortunate.
It will all go back to the Kavanaugh hearing, though. That was where the Democrats really stepped off the rails.
You need that guy from the middle of the country to talk to the left coast and right coast socialists, and I don't think that person's there anymore. Let's talk about Clean Missouri. Clean Missouri, look, I think everybody, the ethics reform stuff, if you're in Jefferson City and you think that any of those ethics reforms are going to fundamentally change anything, I think that's great and all sounds good. It comes down to redistricting. Should the state auditor be in charge of redistricting? I think it sounds good, great politics, questionable policy.
Devil's in the details, right? I mean, that's when you look at it and you start looking at Clean Missouri and you're like, great, I love this. This is ethics reform. I'm all for it. You start digging into it and I think we're all on the panel going to say, too much for one person, right? We don't need to have this, too much political power in redistricting down to one person. I'm probably going to vote against it. I wish that it was a better bill. I wish it was just about ethics, but it did turn into, for me, about redistricting.
Yeah.
I'll defend Clean Missouri. Then I might be if nobody else is going to, I'll do it. If you look at the results, Claire McCaskill will get, no matter in whatever scenario, 45% of the vote, let's say, give or take.
Absolutely.
So for 45% of the state will vote Democrat, that's not reflected in the General Assembly. If Clean Missouri is not the answer, as I think you might not think it is, what is?
Well, and that's where the rubber hits the road, because I do think that our legislative districts in the state do not reflect the population, and I think most everybody agrees on that. The problem with doing this is you're going to take, urban districts. A lot of them are minority represented, and you're going to have to break those districts up in order to find enough Republicans in order to comply with this law, which means you're going to have spaghetti districts that go from the river out to St. Charles, and you take people away from their constituents. I think most people agree that the best way to have done it would be to just reduce the number of House seats. It's outrageous that we have that many.
Most people in the cities would agree with that.
Well, but I think if you're going to talk about better reflecting the population, you make the seats a little bit bigger. You in essence, moderate them naturally, not force people. And so I think Clean Missouri, I think they were trying to address a problem. I think how they attempted to address the problem is what the problem is, and I can't support it.
Casey, you work in these House districts. I have to say, Sean Nicholson, very, very intelligent guy. I've been on this show several times. I think he's come up with a very good idea, and I think it's going to pass, right? Should it?
I think it will pass. I don't think it should pass. I agree with everyone else. There's too much in this bill. If this were just ethics reform, I would vote for it in a heartbeat, hands down, no problem. But there's so much more to this. The piece that a lot of people aren't talking about is the Sunshine Law, where your communication with your state representative and their staff person is now available. A lot of people go to their state rep with very personal issues with state agencies, with Medicaid, with social services, things like that. And I think they're a lot less likely to have those communications with their representative now.
Well, I don't think, David, you should ever tell the government anything, but because you know these districts better than anyone, my point comes back to, if you're drawing these districts and you're going to spaghetti strap, and what you'd have to do to moderate them, at the end of the day, though, how do you ever get to Jane's point? What if it were the Republicans? The Republicans one time were getting more percentage of the statewide vote, and they weren't represented.
The problem is it is a well-intentioned piece of legislation that was very poorly drawn and executed.
Very politically well drawn.
And they don't get to the real problem. Frankly, if you didn't protect incumbents in redistricting, that's what leads to the gerrymandering. It's always when the incumbents want to keep their district or they want to keep this piece. Then you draw the whole map around them. Been there, done that. I promise you that's how it's done.
But wasn't that
if you quit
in a
favoring the
post-term
incumbents, you wouldn't even have
in
these
post-term
problems.
limits, you're very few you're going to serve in the new district anyway.
Right. Well, but that's
It all depends on who's sitting in the chair at the time.
These are our friends, but everybody who has one more election wants to get every. How about the fight in the Central Missouri district represented by Caleb Radman, whether it was Cooper County or the other county, or Randolph.
Yeah,
I mean,
you could have went to Randolph.
And then the whole maps, because it's a piece of a puzzle.
On the ethics portion, Casey, give me a prediction. You have liberal editorial boards and liberal papers criticizing a conservative legislature. If that legislature passed ethics reform once a week, every week for the next 5 years, and they still pass conservative laws, the liberal papers would call them unethical, right?
Absolutely. They would still find some
I get it.
flaw.
That's my ironclad. Take it to the bank, led by prediction. Give me a prediction. What does Clean Missouri pass by?
No, it gets a big number, 55, 56%.
What's it pass by?
I agree.
20 points?
I think it could be big. I think minimum wage is going to be bigger. I think minimum wage is going to be the highest performing ballot initiative we have.
Completely agree.
And
Sean Nicholson, Democrat of the Year?
Well, I mean, look, I agree with David. I think there were good intentions, and I wanted to support it. And I think the devil was in the details, and it's a problem.
I think it passes big.
I do too.
Not as big as, like Jane
Minimum
said, with
wage.
minimum wage, but I do think that it passes.
Well, Sean will get my nomination for Democrat of the Year then.
Well, of course you would.
Everybody gets Democrat of the Year. Stick around. We're going to do some more predictions, have some fun. We're on the Christmas Eve of the political season. But if you're looking for something to do, it's election day, not a lot of news, go to showmemissouri.com. We were up in Worth County this last week, smallest county in the state. You can hear how Ben Appleknap, a buddy of mine from Worth County, he got to learn the difference of what a stop and a rolling stop is on the courthouse square in Grant City. Enjoy that. We'll be right back after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Looking to get quality insurance at a price you can afford? Now you can, thanks to CFM Insurance. Select from our broad range of farm, home, and rental property coverage. Find an agent right in your local area, as CFM is represented by a network of 200 independent agencies throughout Missouri. For personal and dependable service from a company with a history of insuring the families of Missouri that dates back to 1869, visit weinsuremissouri.com and find an agent near you today.
It just makes sense to ensure life-saving safety improvements for our roads and highways, like rumble strips, guardrails, highway dividers, and safer bridges. So I'm voting yes for Prop D. Let's start repairing Missouri's over 2,000 bridges in poor or weight-restricted condition. Bridges getting more dangerous every day for our families, school buses, and emergency responders to cross, with funds regularly audited and constitutionally designated. Prop D's a bargain to keep my family and yours safer.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Amendment 3, the quote Bradshaw Amendment, is the wrong choice for medical marijuana.
It's funded by an individual attorney and creates a research institute that only he'd chair, even though he's not a scientist.
It puts a 15% tax on medical marijuana.
The highest medical marijuana tax in the nation.
And while Bradshaw's raising our taxes, news reports show he hasn't paid his own taxes.
I'm voting no on 3.
I'm voting no on 3.
Vote no on Amendment 3.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics, a full opinion maker panel. What else can we do before the election? Let's talk about the state auditor's race. Jane Dueker, these races tend to go with the top of the ticket, although Claire McCaskill's went against that before in different things. This race does seem to be somewhat tied to the U.S. Senate race. If Claire McCaskill wins, Nicole Galloway wins, right?
Yeah, I think Nicole actually, I mean, even if Claire would lose by some, I still think Nicole.
What's that number?
I still think she wins probably by 4, just because I know many, many Republicans that just cannot stomach a vote for this woman. So I think that her utter lack of qualifications, her ability to even run her own bills, I think that a lot of that has burned through. And so I think Nicole has probably a little bit of a bump regardless.
Now, David said that about a Democrat. You'd be all at him. Nicole Galloway, I think, probably has done enough to deserve re-election, right?
I think she's done enough. Plus, she kind of has that, what we talked about a minute ago, kind of that Joe Biden factor for state politics.
Bit, yeah.
There's not a lot of bad opinions of Nicole Galloway. So she comes into a room and you look at her, qualified, does her job. She's, fantastic on Democratic policies. I think she deserved enough for re-election. I think she wins, +5.
David, there is a number that if Josh Hawley wins by, Sandra McDowell comes from and pulls off another stunning election night upset.
No, there's no question. But again, it depends on who's voting. I think the votes are going to follow the Trump approval rating statewide and in the different subdivisions where they're competitive. I don't think the auditor's race has been competitive, but resources are way outsized. And unless Hawley wins by 8 points, which I don't think he will.
8?
Unless he wins by 8, which I don't think he will, then Nicole Galloway will be reelected as auditor.
I think it's an interesting thing. There's a lot of people that have been very tough on her. I think maybe too tough. I think if the roles were reversed, if this was a Democrat woman running, they would not have been.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I think, like we've all agreed, it depends on how the U.S. Senate race goes down. I think if Hawley pulls off a win by 7 or 8,
7 or 8,
then
You're getting into fantasy land here for a minute. It's it's the bizarro world.
But I mean, I do think if it were that high, it would drag. But I don't think that's going to happen.
There was at one time, there was not that long ago. If we look in the Wayback Machine, Jane Dueker was predicting wins for all these Democrats, and Donald Trump come in and carry the entire ticket. And I think Donald Trump could carry this ticket again.
But Trump was plus 19, and we're not going to see a plus 19.
We're not going to see a plus 19.
Right.
I don't know that they need a plus 19. Do they?
I mean,
well, give me the prediction. How much does Hawley have to win by to elect Sandra McDowell?
Oh, I think I agree with David. It's got to be at least 8.
Yeah, same thing. And that's just unrealistic.
Except on the Greg Keller Twitter.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to my Greg Keller
Keller
Twitter.
has his own world, yeah.
I think if Hawley wins by 4, she may be the state auditor. Let's talk about pot. I think the time has come for pot, right? There's a couple amendments out there. The one with Bradshaw, I think it's great. If you're going to pay for your own amendment, put your name in it, right? But it may be disqualifying, and I think the Amendment 2 may have it, right? I mean, is it the time for pot?
Amendment 3 is disqualified just out of any sort of understanding of what government is supposed to be as opposed to self-imposed royalty. I mean, Amendment 3 is an embarrassment to all of us who have a law license. To think that a fellow lawyer tried to do that, it was just horrible.
I don't know how it's not an illegal delegation of public power to a private entity. I'm not, I think that crosses the line. I think it's pretty hard to get that done, but I have big issues with that. I think Missourians are ready. I think these are going to pass. I think there may be varying degrees as to which one gets more votes, and we're going to have a legal quagmire after trying to figure out which provisions apply and which ones will, depending on the vote. But I think Missourians are going to do this. I don't think it's going to be as high as minimum wage, maybe not as high as Clean Missouri, but I think that marijuana is coming to Missouri.
I think two things also on that. First of all, it passed in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is much more conservative than we are. The pendulum is swinging back on this. If we think about, let's go back to marriage equality, right? There was a state amendment here that outlawed gay marriage. We're not there anymore. The pendulum has swung back to the center and to the left of center on that. I think we're at the same place where we are on pot. It is not, the opinion of what it was 10, 15 years ago, and I think it's going to pass. Like I said, not as big as minimum wage, but it will pass.
Can I argue with that just a little bit? I don't even think it's a question of swinging back. Look, I don't use cannabis, but we all have friends who have used cannabis and use cannabis. It's been accepted in this society for way over 10 years. It's time the law quit being a hypocrite and catch up with it. I'm not only for medical marijuana, I'd be for recreational marijuana, just not because marijuana is good or bad, but because the law doesn't need to be a hypocrite. And that's what we're really talking about.
Well, it's conservative for the government not to care what you smoke. I think you should smoke whatever you want. It's not the government's business.
I think people have different opinions on that, but I have heard from a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans who are supporting some of these marijuana initiatives. So I think all three of them have a chance of passing, and then I think the courts will decide.
Jen, the difference is between 2 and 3, whichever one gets the most votes, right?
Yeah, because they're constitutional.
Yeah,
the Constitution always trumps statute, so you've got 2 constitutional provisions, and then you have one that's a proposition. So I think that 2, I think, seems to be getting more momentum, which then, would take 3 out of the mix. But then you have the statutory one, and the courts are required to try to mesh them together if they can. So that's why it's going to be, we've never had this happen in Missouri, so I think this is going to be very interesting.
Let's talk a little highways, David Steelman. I mean, you've really seen adults come in and do adult leadership on an important issue. And of course, you're going to have the has-beens that everywhere on Twitter. But really, you have the real leaders of the state have stepped up and said, we need to address transportation funding. It's not politically easy. It's not politically popular. It's actually leading.
I think Proposition D and the support by Governor Parson and by Kehoe is extremely important, not just for the highways and for the infrastructures. It is an effort to return to governing. And by governing, I mean putting the people of Missouri, their needs, their children's opportunities ahead of pure politics. Parson and Kehoe have done it. If they can pass this, it's not just good for the infrastructure, it's good for the state. It is, to my mind, what they've done is the most important thing I've seen in Missouri politics in the last 20 years.
I think it's the opportunity for Missouri to do what Washington can't do, which is come together on a bipartisan, diverse coalition. I am proud to stand with Labor and Democrats, with Governor Parson and Lieutenant Governor Kehoe to get this done. This would be the biggest investment Missouri has made in its infrastructure, in its state, on a bipartisan level since I've been in politics. I think this is a huge thing.
Well, let's give one more credit,
I'm
too.
a huge
The
supporter.
legislature passed it. Let's give the Republican legislature credit for trying to do the right thing, not the political thing.
And I think when Ron Richard was in that room, he deserves some credit for this.
That's right.
Mike Kehoe's been pushing this when he was in the Senate. This is a capstone achievement if it happens. And a guy I think maybe should deserve some credit, Scott Faughn. He's been all over this state. He's really
working hard.
He's brought the message home.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen some great leadership on this issue from both sides of the aisle, like Jane said. And I think because of that, it'll have a chance of passing.
Does it pass?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it passes.
I think too.
I don't think it passes.
I think it passes by a very slim margin.
While I am enthusiastic about its possibilities, I am not nearly as enthusiastic about it.
I'm going to vote yes and twist it to make sure, but I think
it's going to depend again on Holly. Holly wins by 8 points. Prop D does not pass.
Happening, yes.
But I think it's going to be a close race, and I think it passes by 1.
I think it passes just from what I call the adult in the room standard. Right? I think that people get into the box and they look at this and it's like, from what we've all said, this is the adult in the room type of scenario. We all think that this is a great deal. Everybody's in on it. Let's give it a chance. And I think it passes by the slimmest of margins.
I think it should pass. I also think when he says it'll pass by 1, he means it won't pass. But what that actually means.
I mean, I hope it passes by 1. That's what
I hope it passes by 20. I'm with you. But in case we have you here, the House, the Republicans have a supermajority. I guess you have to lose some seats, right? People were talking about 10, 15 at one time. What's a good night for Republicans?
A good night is if we keep the supermajority, 109, 110 seats.
So you could lose 6.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think happens? I think around 4 or 5. I think it was about to be a bloodbath at one time. Kavanaugh and Hawley have helped stem that tide.
4 or 5. There'll be a few surprises. There always are.
How many seats Democrats pick up?
Nah, I'd say 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
It's still going to be a Republican supermajority, and we're still going to have policies from the 1980s. So it's, you know, we're not there yet to talk about a competitive House.
You can't let him get away with that.
I think most folks would take Reagan back. I think what'll be interesting though is the normal battlegrounds, Jefferson County, the Boot Heel. Those aren't the battlegrounds now. It's changed. I think where you'll make lose seats is the Northland, right, in Kansas City.
Yeah, the suburban areas are where we're seeing the shift.
And you represent way too many districts. I mean, you represent districts Republicans should never represent. That also hurts.
That's true. We hold districts currently. The Republican historical percentage is as low as 42%. Those are seats, you know, on paper we really shouldn't hold, but we've recruited really good candidates. Yeah. We've raised the money. They've worked extremely hard. So all the things come together and allowed us to have such a big supermajority. I think we're seeing the trend shift a little bit. The battlegrounds will shift some, and we'll see if we're able to maintain that.
She's too modest. Let's give credit where credit is due. HRCC is a remarkable political operation and has been over the last decade.
Yes. We need to seat him over here.
How many seats can the Democrats pick up a Senate seat?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I think Rucker is very interesting. I also think Knorr is an interesting. I think those two, Springfield and
the state will miss out if Lincoln Huff doesn't win. I think Lincoln Huff will be one of the best post-term limit senators.
But I will say, I think Claire has really done a lot of good work down there, which is going to help him. So I think there are two possibilities, and Jeffco I think could be in play, but I think the other two.
I think Lincoln Huff is an outstanding public servant. Will be a great senator if he wins. Having said that, there's always a surprise. I believe if you ask me to predict either Lukemeyer Rucker individually or Huff Knorr individually, I go with the Republican. But in the aggregate, I think the Democrat picks up one of those two seats.
With a minute left, who won the week?
I'm going to go with Joe Biden. I mean, comes in, fires up the crowd. The only national Democrat I think that could do that, and had a great rally.
Who won the week?
I would say Governor Parson, and that's Prop D. I'm a huge supporter, and so that's why I think.
Who won the week?
Speaker Elijah Hart, the youngest speaker in the country.
You talk about the Republican bench is very strong. People like him.
Yes.
Who won the week?
Citizens of Missouri. They're seeing adult leadership on serious issues. It is what's best for this state.
I'll say a guy, no matter how the vote comes out Tuesday night, I'm going to say Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. He's actually taken on real things, done real issues when he was a senator and now as Lieutenant Governor. I think it's one thing to say on Twitter as a has-been and tweet and carp. It's one thing to lead. I think Mike Kehoe leads. And we hope you'll lead by coming and watching our post-election edition. See which one of these predictions are right or wrong next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.